I knew something was rotten the moment my badge beeped red and the elevator spat me out on the lobby floor like a used tissue. No warning, no explanation, just a curt email from HR with the subject line, new role alignment. Alignment my ass. 1 week I'm managing breach reports and hardening firewall protocols. The next, I'm sitting under a fluorescent bulb that hums like it's judging me, answering calls for a company that suddenly thinks I belong beside a ficus. Front desk duties, they said. Like it was a promotion. Like I should be grateful they didn't escort me out with a sad cardboard box and a mug that says #1hacker. My new station came with a headset that smelled like someone else's scalp and a laminated flowchart of how to route executive calls, none of which I followed, by the way, because I wasn't about to play secretary to the same suits who'd gutted my department like a fish on a budget grill. The cherry? My replacement Dylan was 26, cocky, and about as subtle as a raccoon in a dishwasher. He wouldn't even look me in the eye, just kept tapping on his mechanical keyboard like he was coding the next SpaceX launch, when in reality, he once locked himself out of GitHub because he misspelled admin. Now, somewhere around this part, gotta pause real quick. 97% of you beautiful lurkers listen to stories like this without subscribing. No pressure, but that little red button? It's like a high five for the whole team putting this chaos into words. And trust me, it seriously helps when legal tries to sue us for emotional damage. Back to the crime scene, ack of the lobby. Every exec walked past me like I was an Alexa with a coffee addiction. Smile, nod, condescend. My old team, ghosted. I wasn't just demoted, I was erased. Even the break room fridge stopped respecting me. Someone ate my yogurt twice and had the gall to leave the spoon. But I didn't rage. I didn't file a complaint or cause a scene. I watched. I listened. I waited. Because here's what they forgot: I built this network. Every lock, every login, every badge door, they all run through systems I designed. And while they stripped my title and parked me like a potted plant, they never revoked my backend access. Amateurs. By the end of my first week behind the welcome desk, I'd found my old credentials still nested inside an admin group, buried but active. One click later, I was back inside the skeleton of the company, quiet as mold, tracking everything. They handed me a headset, but I never stopped wearing my old keys. I started seeing things: unusual badge activity after hours, a VP logging in from 2 cities at once, someone accessing restricted HR files from the contractor Wi-Fi. I saw a guest badge used 15 times in one weekend, always between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., always tied to one office on the 8th floor, where the same VP who called me non-essential kept his spare blazer and married mouth shut. They laughed behind their glass doors, tossing birthday bagels my way like I was the office ferret. But I smiled. I logged it. I timestamped it. Every door that opened when it shouldn't. Every name that didn't match the schedule. Every email flagged for deletion but bounced through a mirrored server. They didn't know I'd rerouted months ago when I still gave a damn. See, I didn't want revenge. At first. But there's a special kind of fuel that burns when someone looks at you, knows you built the dam keeping the flood at bay, and still chooses to piss on your boots in front of everyone. And when you've got keys to the whole dam system, you really ought to think twice before tossing you to the lobby like expired toner. They forgot who I was, so I started reminding them. Quietly. The lobby windows were so clean you could see your future in them, or at least your severance package if you stared too long. I spent my mornings behind that glass fishbowl watching execs strut through like they were auditioning for a reality show called America's Most Punchable Faces. Their smiles were empty, like bad botox, and their greetings were worse. Still here, Julia? Or don't work too hard, it's Friday, even if it was Tuesday. Every time someone asked me if I missed my old life upstairs, I pictured drop-kicking them into the revolving door. But then the weekends got weird. It started with lights flickering on the 8th floor Saturday nights around 11. That wasn't janitorial. The cleaning crew was strictly 6 p.m., 9 p.m., in and out, ate in cash envelopes and afraid to make eye contact. I checked the security footage through my still intact backend access, expecting to see a badge swipe or scheduled maintenance. Nothing. No log. Just one of the VPs, Vincent, a walking cholesterol hazard in a Tom Ford tie, letting himself in with what looked like a guest pass and locking the door behind him. 3 nights in a row, same routine. Around midnight, woman with bleached hair and a Forever 21 trench coat shows up, buzzed and manually. She's not on the payroll, she's not on the visitor list, but she's definitely on top of Vincent's desk. I know this because corporate was too cheap to upgrade from fisheye hallway cams, and I caught a reflection in the elevator mirror when the door opened too soon. Guess his performance reviews aren't the only things he fakes. And still, I said nothing. Just smiled. Just logged. One morning, Vincent walked past my desk with his usual smug smirk, still reeking of Armani and bad decisions. He paused, leaned in like we were buddies, and said, "Front desk suits you better, less thinking required." It took everything in me not to shove his face through the phone directory. Instead, I let that smirk settle into my bones like rust. And when he disappeared down the corridor, I pulled up my terminal, opened the legacy admin panel we used during the last ransomware scare, and scrolled. There it was. A credential I hadn't used in years. Mine, dormant, overlooked. Not flagged for revocation because technically I'd rolled it into a compliance sandbox before the restructuring. No one noticed, no one cared, and now it was live again. All it took was one keystroke and I was in. The dashboard came up like an old friend, badge logs, entry patterns, live feed access. I could have pulled VPN tunnels and backdoored the mail server, but I wasn't here to break anything. Not yet, I was here to watch, because they weren't just screwing around with mistresses and guest passes. They were moving data in ways that didn't make sense. On Tuesday, the new Chief Information Security Officer, Braden with a Y, entered the building at 8:06 a.m., but his badge had been active since 6:42. Not his office, multiple floors, rooms requiring dual auth entry, and cameras showed no one but janitorial. Either Braden figured out teleportation, or someone was ghosting badges. That's when I really started to dig. I cross-referenced server logins with building access, found an uptick in failed multi-factor logins at odd hours, traced them to a VPN ID used by contractors that HR didn't seem to know existed. Checked the credentials. One of them belonged to a guy named Trevor, who once tried to flirt with me by comparing routers to relationship boundaries. I smiled through his entire speech and got him to admit he was working on a side build for Vincent. Side build? Wasn't on the books, wasn't on any invoice, but it showed up in the logs under a shell firm with a name that matched one of the CEO's advisory trusts. Cute. At this point, Shame wasn't even in the building anymore. She'd packed up her desk and left the country. What I felt was amusement. Bitter, clinical amusement. Like watching toddlers play with matches on a gas station roof and call it leadership. So I kept logging. Every odd entry, every missing audit, every mirrored log that shouldn't exist. I even started naming the folders: Vincent After Dark, Braden Phase Shift, Trevor the Contractor from Hell. Not because I thought it was funny, but because it would be. Later, they thought the glass wall kept me out, but they forgot who wired the damn thing. The camera feeds weren't pretty, but they were honest. Grainy, fisheye, time-stamped honesty. And if there's one thing liars hate, it's being seen. I started every shift the same way: coffee black, headset on, smile plastered like a bumper sticker on a totaled car, and then, once the morning rush of people pretending they were important died down, I'd open my real workstation. Not the kiosk crap the receptionist laptop came with. My real station lived in an encrypted sandbox I patched together from the back-end skeleton they forgot I owned. From there, I watched. Badge logs, entry records, timestamp patterns. I tracked them like they were migrating birds with trust funds. Everyone has a rhythm. Some execs come in early, some late, some take 2-hour lunches to strategize over steak frights. But one pattern was off. The new Chief Information Security Officer, Braden with a Y because of course, never logged himself in. Like never, his badge, busy as hell. It pinged off conference room locks, secure floors, even the biometric server vault twice in 1 week. But Braden himself, ghost. If the badge was a person, it worked overtime. If Braden was a person, he spent most of his days in the executive gym sweating out liability clauses. That's when I started tagging badge IDs and correlating them to camera feeds. Footage showed someone else entering restricted areas with Braden's badge. Slimmer build. Moved like he was casing the place, not working it. Whoever it was, he knew the dead angles of every hallway lens. I almost missed him twice, if not for a reflection in the elevator panel and the shadow cast by a poorly aligned breakroom light. My gut said contractor. That theory got confirmed when a real-life meathead with a barcode tattoo tried to flirt with me during a slow Thursday shift. You ever wonder what the execs really do up there? He asked, leaning over my desk like he was auditioning for the role of least secure human alive. I blinked slowly. Sure. But I figure if they were doing anything illegal, they'd be smarter than giving badge access to gym equipment. He grinned like I'd passed some test. Not everyone's dumb. Me. I'm on a private contract. Off books. Building a sandbox system for discrete vendors. N-dot up the ass. You don't say, I said, already opening a blank notepad file in my off-screen workspace. He kept talking. Most men do when they think the woman in front of them isn't smarter. He mentioned Vincent. He mentioned encrypted backups. He even mentioned a backdoor interface that let the exec team run parallel to the corporate network. Shadow IT, I said flatly. He winked like I'd handed him a participation trophy. You know your stuff, I smiled. I used to teach the stuff. After he left, I pulled every access log tied to his badge. He was working under a vendor name I didn't recognize, Mornwell Strategic Solutions. Cute. Sounded like a tax shelter that wore a suit. I cross-referenced that name against our vendor list, nothing. Then against the internal payment logs. Again, nothing. Then I ran it through the old procurement shell checker I'd written 3 years ago when we suspected a different exec of funneling contracts to his college roommate. Took 2 minutes to pull up the registration. 1-month-old LLC, registered out of a P.O. box in Delaware. No tax ID on file. The listed contact email? A ProtonMail account forwarded to an alias tagged vRenner at ProtonMail.com. Vincent again. They didn't even try to hide it. Just slapped a blazer on a rat and called it a consultant. The logs kept piling. A dozen guest passes assigned to Mornwell staff who never signed in officially. Badge IDs that changed MAC addresses mid-shift. Internal systems cloned, then wiped. I even caught a few entries manually adjusted. Someone inside security was doctoring timestamps. I tagged them all, bundled them into folders named things like Operation Cockroach Hotel and Ghost Badge Chronicles. See, people think cybersecurity is about firewalls and passwords, but it's not. It's about knowing where the bones are buried and listening for the shovel. And I was the only one listening. No alerts, no pings, no concern from the suits upstairs, because they weren't asleep at the wheel. They were the wheel. The email hit my inbox at 8:01 a.m. sharp. Subject line, Security Alignment Protocol Update. Translation, CYA season had begun. The memo was full of hollow phrases like proactive risk recalibration and tightening internal data flows, but the real kicker came halfway down, buried like a landmine in HR speak. Given recent concerns around minor data anomalies, all clerical level staff will undergo renewed compliance monitoring. Clerical level. That was me now. You ever read something so fake it makes your teeth itch? I sat there, headset halfway on, reading that sentence over and over while sipping coffee that suddenly tasted like betrayal. They were setting the stage. If the walls started cracking, they'd pin it on the reception desk. The leaks they were whispering about in the hallways, the ones they were actually creating through ghost badges and contractor side hustles, all going to be blamed on people like me, the invisible class. I didn't even flinch, didn't print it, just archived it into a folder titled Corporate Comedy Vol, Roman 4. Later that day, I caught a flicker of familiar usernames in the system logs. My old team, the cybersecurity crew I built from scratch, ran a scan at 2:42 p.m. Quiet, off schedule, buried in a script labeled Temp Network Balancer Test. Subtle, but I know our naming conventions like I know the inside of a BIOS chip. They found something. I saw them flagging files, and just as quickly wiping logs and scrubbing temp storage. Not a trace left by 3:10, they knew, but they weren't going to act because if they spoke up, they'd be next. And in a place like this, loyalty was a liability. That's when I knew I was on my own. That night, I brought home the first encrypted drive, not a thumbstick. A full terabyte SSD with AES 256 encryption, double auth access, and zero cloud sync. Old school, like me. Every badge log, every camera snapshot, every shell firm invoice or guest badge ID, copied, cataloged, indexed. A daily ritual now. I even set up a nightly cron job to pull the logs automatically and mirror them to a hidden volume. You don't survive long in cybersecurity without preparing for the day someone tries to erase you. I stopped waving at the executives. I stopped pretending to laugh at their jokes. When someone asked if I was settling into the new role, I just smiled with my eyes dead. My headset became a prop. The front desk a blindfold they thought they'd strapped on me. But underneath the silence, something in me was crystallizing. Not rage, not yet something colder, like a lab technician watching a specimen mutate in the Petri dish. I didn't hate them, I understood them. This was survival for them, for me, for everyone pretending the fire wasn't in the building, so I kept my voice sweet. My reports filed. My logs immaculate, and I waited. Because pretense is a costume, and sooner or later the seams split, and I intended to be the one holding the needle when it did. He caught me by the elevators because of course he did. That's where men like him operate best. In corners, in transitions, where there's no room to walk away without turning your back. Vincent, VP of Strategic Partnerships, which roughly translated to professional liability with a budget. He smiled that managerial serial killer smile, the one HR teaches them in workshops. Calm eyes, tight jaw, hands just close enough to seem non-threatening. Keep smiling, Julia, he said, his cologne choking out the air between us. You wouldn't want to be next. I blinked once. Slowly, like a lizard assessing the threat level of a damp sock. He thought that smile was power. He thought I was afraid. What I was recording. Because I'd installed a sub-$30 mic patch into my badge casing last week. Not company issued. Mine. Because I stopped trusting corporate hardware the moment they handed me a receptionist headset and tried to convince me it was a leadership redirection opportunity. Still, I gave him what he wanted, at least to his face. I grinned like a lunatic and replied, of course. Smiling's in the job description now, isn't it? He walked off smug, shoes clicking like he was scoring his own evil entrance theme. I waited until the elevator arrived empty, stepped in, and let the doors shut before I muttered, "You first, Vincent, you first." That afternoon, I got a new email from HR. The subject line made me laugh out loud. Performance concerns. Julia Lynn, Week 3 review. The body? A masterpiece of weaponized office bureaucracy. Bullet-pointed offenses included. Arrived 9:01 a.m. instead of 9:00 a.m. twice. Hostile posture noted by visiting vendor. Translation. I didn't flirt back. Inappropriate use of company printing resources. I printed my own PTO request on recycled paper, no less. They CC'd my direct manager, who hadn't spoken to me in 2 weeks. It left out that I'd covered 2 lunch breaks for no-show temp and stayed 45 minutes late to buzz in the server repair crew. Details. Who needs them? I printed the complaint out on the same printer naturally and tacked it to my cubicle wall, right next to a sticky note that read, "Smile, you're being sabotaged." Then I opened my compliance logs. Over the last year, I documented 42 separate audit trails, each reviewed, signed off, timestamped, and certified. Nothing in my record had ever been flagged until now, so I exported the entire set. Zipped, encrypted, and dumped into a secure volume on my offsite drive under a new folder name, Character Assassination Act 1, PDF. That night, while doing my daily mirror of logs, I noticed something strange in the badge data. The coup, Jackson Slater, known internally as the Shredder for the number of departments he'd gutted, had a badge entry timestamped for 7:17 p.m. Nothing unusual there except another log from a different wing of the building showed the same badge ID unlocking a secure archive room at exactly 7:17 p.m. Same ID, same timestamp, different doors, no override code. I ran it twice. Then I ran it 3 more times. Badge duplication. Either a clone or a manual override injected into the system. Both violations of our internal zero-access redundancy policy, a policy I wrote. I dug deeper. The archive room access wasn't even scrubbed. It was flagged as normal. The log had been backfilled, spliced in by someone who knew what they were doing, but not enough to cover the time collision. Someone was covering something, and they were willing to bend time to do it. By the time I shut down my system for the night, I wasn't smiling. I was sharpening. The fire alarm wailed at 3:47 p.m. Loud, shrill, a scream and fluorescent. Everyone groaned, grabbed their half-drunk lattes, and trudged to the stairwell like it was just another Wednesday inconvenience. But me? I knew damn well this wasn't routine. Fire drills are scheduled quarterly, coordinated, logged. Announced with a fake smile email from facilities 3 days in advance, safety first. Don't forget your comfy shoes. This one, zero warning. Zero paperwork. And just so happened to fall 20 minutes after I flagged the duplicate badge entry from the COO. Coincidence, right. I stepped into the stairwell last, letting the others shuffle ahead. From there, I had the angle just enough to see someone in a maintenance vest enter the office from the far door with a master key. Not the facilities guy. I knew the real one. This guy walked like he didn't want to be noticed. I stayed calm. Always calm, that's the trick. You don't let the panic show until it's useful. The drill lasted 58 minutes, not 30, not 45, 58 minutes. I timed it on my watch. They let us back up floor by floor hours last because fire protocol required extra verification. My station looked the same, chair slightly askew, headset coiled neatly, the corporate orchid dying in the corner untouched. But my gut dropped the moment I sat down. Mouse speed changed. Wallpaper reset to default. And my keyboard felt different, like someone had peeled off the keys and re-glued them. I opened my workstation. Logs were gone, my sandboxed access node disabled, my cached login for the admin panel erased. Cute. They thought this was the end game, a quiet sabotage, a silent lobotomy. Strip my tools, wipe my traces, and wait for me to crack like a fluorescent bulb under pressure. What they didn't know, I never kept anything critical on the local drive. Not anymore. Not since the memo blaming clerical staff. Not since Vincent's elevator threat. They'd broken into a decoy. My real access credentials lived on a separate encrypted keychain. Offline, air-gapped. I pulled the drive from my bag, slotted it into the hidden port tucked beneath the desk, thank you, janitorial blueprints, and watched the bootloader spin to life. 30 seconds later, every wiped log, every security feed, every badge discrepancy restored. I leaned back in my chair, headset dangling, smile spreading. Not the front desk smile, not the corporate grin. The other one, the hunter's smile. That night, I sent a message. Not to HR, not to IT, not to Vincent. To Linda Menendez, my old friend from the Infosic days. We used to call her the Velvet Hammer, soft voice, courtroom spine. She jumped ship to a boutique legal firm 2 years ago. Now she handled internal investigations for high-risk clients. The email was short. Subject, coffee soon? Body, thinking about breach trends. You wouldn't believe the badge data I've been seeing. Weird, huh? Let me know if your firm has bandwidth. I've got questions. That was it. No attachments, no accusations. Just bait, perfectly legal. By morning, she replied, tomorrow, 11 a.m., your place or mine? And just like that, the passive phase was over. No more smiling at ghosts. No more pretending I didn't hear the wires hum. They'd made a move. Now it was my turn. Checkmate in progress. The air the night before a quarterly review always tastes like stale ambition and last-minute panic. The suits stay late, pretending to fine-tune slide decks when really, they're just deleting red flags and swapping fonts to make moderate losses look like growth potential. This time, they weren't alone. I was with them, quietly. Not in the boardroom, of course. My name wasn't on any invite. My presence wasn't required. But every login, every edit, every thumb drive plugged in after hours, I saw all of it. I watched like a patient god behind the curtain, compiling every sin into a clean, brutal ledger. I called the final folder Q4 guest stars. It had everything. Vincent's guest badge trail. Over 42 unscheduled after-hours entries logged under external vendor with no security clearance. Braden's badge clone anomalies. 5 timestamp conflicts, 3 spatial violations, and 1 badge used at 2:17 a.m. from 2 ends of the campus simultaneously. COO's sandbox system. tied directly to invoices from Mornwell Strategic Solutions, the ghost LLC that somehow billed $0 yet handled infrastructure access. Internal scripts used to erase audit logs, originating from a machine labeled exec-conf01. CEO's badge used at both the downtown HQ and the West Annex at the same second. You ever see a CEO in two places at once? Neither have I, but the system had. I printed the logs, all 118 pages, bound them, labeled it Internal Security Compliance, escalation log confidential, and sealed it with a sticker from the company's branded onboarding kits. The kind they hand out to interns with promises like your journey starts here. Fitting. That night, around 8:50 p.m., I logged into the security backend and found the one final piece I'd left untouched, the override protocol, a failsafe tucked deep in the root directory that allowed the executive tier to no alert triggered, no notification sent, just one simple database write, timestamped under maintenance protocol. After that, I did something wild, something none of them would ever expect from a woman they demoted to the lobby. I brought donuts. Actual donuts. From the good place, the one downtown with the thick glaze and the passive-aggressive cashier. A full dozen in a box labeled Exec Team Q4 Fuel. I set them on the break room table at 7:56 a.m., right between the stale K-cups and the sign reminding us to clean up after yourselves, you're adults. Then I sat at my desk, cheerful, calm, greeting people as they walked in with big day, huh? And good luck in there. Vincent passed by first. He looked like a man who'd slept in his car and justified it as hustle. Behind him, Braden yawned so hard I saw the lack of credentials inside his skull. The CEO showed up at 8:21, nodded at me like I was part of the wallpaper and walked straight to the elevators. None of them knew they were already locked in a cage. The logs were live. The credentials were primed. And the second they tried to ascend their ivory tower, the system would remember who built the damn thing and who could tear it down quietly. Monday came dressed like any other, a little too quiet, a little too gray, but I knew the difference. It was in the way the glass doors hesitated before sliding open, in the hush that fell across the lobby like someone had cut the feed on the corporate soundtrack. The execs arrived early. Of course they did. Quarterly call with the board. Full dog and pony show queued up. Slides filled with inflated metrics, legal footnotes small enough to be spiritual. Vincent was first. He swiped his badge at the elevator. Read again, read. He slapped the reader like it owed him rent. Nothing. Is this thing broken? He barked at me. I looked up from my headset with a practiced blink. Looks fine from here. He tried the side door, then the stairwell. Then the emergency fire exit override, all red. Braden rolled in next, holding a cold brew and his usual smug disbelief in gravity. Tried his badge. Nothing. Tried his backup card. Nothing. Tried yelling at the wall like the infrastructure feared him. The CEO arrived at 8:12, coffee in one hand, Bluetooth headset already on, barking numbers into the void. He didn't notice the line of panicked lieutenants until he hit the reader himself. Read, you ever watch a grown man realize he doesn't own the ground he's standing on? It's biblical. I answered phones, calmly, logged visitor names, smiled like it was any other Monday, but I could feel the ripples. IT arrived at 8:30, a pair of sleep-deprived engineers with lanyards tangled around their necks like nooses. They jacked into the wall terminal behind the elevators and got hit with what I built. A soft loop recursive lockout. Every credential query returned null, invalid token retry, backup servers, dead. Override port, scrambled. Failsafe reentry terminal in the basement, offline, because I'd mapped every contingency, wrote every fallback plan, and 6 weeks ago I rewrote them again. By 8:46, legal had called my desk. Julia, could you step into the conference room? I swiveled slowly. I'm manning the phones, please. HR arrived next, 3 of them, all sweating like they'd sprinted through a liability seminar. That's when I stood, calm, no flair. Just walked to the security cabinet, opened the drawer they'd forgotten even existed, and pulled out a white binder. Heavy, crisp, walked past the suits, past the blinking badges, past Braden, who was literally Googling badge override script, and set the binder on the front desk with a soft thump. Per protocol, I said, smiling wide, your audit trail is attached. They stared. I didn't blink. Inside that binder, chronological logs of every executive credential, timestamp anomalies, duplicate badge ID entries, cross-reference of guest badge misuse, shell firm tie-ins to internal access nodes, 3 flagged instances of credential injection from unregistered contractor devices. Each page was watermarked, signed by the system. Not me, the system. I wasn't the attacker. I was the witness, and their own tools were my alibi. The last thing I said before returning to my desk, everything you need is in there, you just have to look. I called it the Monday lockout incident. Legal labeled it a catastrophic breach before lunchtime. Emergency meetings were held in stairwells and parked Teslas. IT cried. HR hyperventilated into gluten-free muffins. Someone even tried to blame the coffee vendor because clearly espresso sabotage is the new cybercrime. But when the dust settled, the logs told the story. And they didn't tell it their way. Every access I used, documented. time-stamped. Authorized under legacy credentials that were never revoked, because no one thought a receptionist could hold the keys to the kingdom. There was no hacking, no phishing, no brute force, just negligence, just arrogance. Just a company too lazy to clean its own back end. And I was just the broom. The investigation came fast, faster than I expected. The oversight committee reviewed my logs, compared them to internal audit trails, and realized I'd done what their own security team refused to: follow the truth to its ugly little root. Vincent, suspended, pending review for contractor conflicts and guest badge abuse. Braden, gone. Turns out the fake badge activity was just the tip of his fake resume. The CEO, stepping down to explore other opportunities, which is rich considering one of those opportunities might involve testifying under oath. The board didn't thank me, not directly. They did send a proposal. Consultancy contract, oversight, internal sabotage prevention, system hardening, 6 figures, remote optional. The kind of gig they never would have offered the woman smiling at the front desk. But I wasn't her anymore. She never existed. She was just camouflage until they made the mistake of noticing me just enough to think they'd won. I didn't burn the building. I just turned off the lights and handed them a mirror. And now I work from a cabin 2 states over. Logs still come in. The coffee's better. No headset, no Vincent. Just me, my system, and an inbox full of companies asking how to spot the next Julia. They won't, because I never hid. They just never bothered to look. You wanted me visible, I said once to an empty lobby echoing with panic. Now everyone sees. What I love about this story is how it highlights the real weapon in corporate warfare: institutional knowledge. People assume that when you're quiet, you've given up. But often, silence is just the sound of strategy loading. Respect the ones who stop talking and start documenting. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.